This. I might just take this around with me for the entire conference. Right? Yes, you can put your secrets in it. I'll read them aloud. We'll live stream it. It'll be a thing. Yeah. Secrets, yeah. Yeah, I will. I'll make him hold it. So thank you, everybody, for coming today. I'm Daniela. I'm one of the content track co-chairs on the Elements Planning Committee, and I am here to introduce Victor. But before we do that, a couple of things. A reminder to turn off your phones, no buzzing and ringing. I'm sure Victor would appreciate that, and I'm sure our live stream folks would appreciate that. A reminder to fill out the evaluation after this is done. I know I'll find it really helpful as on the planning committee, and I'm sure Victor wants your feedback too. Unless it's bad, then keep it to yourself. No, just kidding. He's in for constructive criticism. And then the last thing is, if you have a question to ask, we ask that you speak into the catch box. And I hope nobody in the back row has it, because I'm afraid to throw it to you. So, so this is for the microphone for the live stream. So if you do have a question, nope, no questions. No questions in the back row.
If you're sitting in the first two rows, you're in danger.
You're in danger. I'm gonna make you guys ask questions, but yeah, I have to throw this to you. So, so yeah, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Okay.
Thanks for the lovely introduction. I guess we'll go ahead and get started. So, I'm Victor Yocco. Nice to meet you all. Thanks for coming out today. Admit it, most of us probably had at least one, if not two, desserts at lunch. It was wonderful. I did too, so if I'm a little sluggish, that might be why. But I'm here today to talk to you about social identity theory, and in particular, how we can design to address people's social identity needs. First, a little bit about me. So I'm a research director at a place called EY Intuitive. We're a design firm located in Philly, and we're growing. So if you're interested in finding out more about that, come see me after the session. I spent 2 years as the Philly Chi Vice Chair. It's just a local professional organization focused on human-computer interactions and UX type fields. I have a PhD from the Ohio State University.
I'm a Buckeye. How did we sit here for 10 minutes and not talk about that, Victor?
I don't know.
OH? Anyone? Okay.
I don't think, wrong crowd, and I know that. All right, so if you can overlook that, we'll do the rest of the session. And then I regularly speak and write about psychology and the application of concepts from psychology to design. And on that note, I have a book coming out on that, and it's currently at the printer, according to my publisher. The only sales pitch I will give you is I do have some pretty bookmarks that I created, and if you're interested in a discount code and finding out more, you can come up here after the presentation. It's not a hard sell, I promise you. All right, and you can follow me on Twitter. Today we're going to talk a little bit about theory and psychology. I'm going to do my best to convince you the web is a social place, but I'm going to be willing to bet I don't have to do too much to convince you of that. Then we're going to talk about social identity theory, which is a specific psychological principle that tries to explain how people develop what's called social identities. I'm going to give you an example from something very popular and well-known, which is Facebook, and how social identity theory plays itself out through Facebook's platform. And then I'll give you a few examples from some other less-known platforms, at least in terms of being social platforms, all in the hopes that I can show you how you might think about accounting for social identity theory in your product if you're a designer, if you're on a team that works with designers, or if you have any type of say in how a product is developed. All right, so first of all, not so much maybe for this crowd, but oftentimes when I'm talking to designers, it's like, okay, I don't understand why theory or psychology should really apply. That's cumbersome terminology. So I like to just try to think of it in the lowest common denominator, which is just try to think of theory as how the APA defines it, an organized set of concepts and principles. So it's something that's organized. People have thought about it. And then it's a testable idea. So you can't just have a theory that can't be tested, because then it's just something that it doesn't explain anything if it constantly changes to adapt to whatever scenario is. So it has to be testable. And the theories that I talk about and that I write about are ones that have actually been around 30 plus years, because they've been tested and people are still talking about them. And while being around for 30 or 40 years might not be the coolest thing if you're the newest digital product, being around for 30 or 40 years or 200 years or 500 years, if you're a theory, can be a good thing, because it means you're standing up to the test of time, you're standing up to the test of being tested by scientists, by academics. And then theory informs your decision-making process. When I was in grad school, I had a professor who was known to say, in the absence of data, people make shit up. Well, Rather than making shit up, you can actually use some theory to help you inform the design of your product if you don't have the luxury of getting out there and collecting data with real users. Although I advocate doing both, bringing in the theory, and my job as a researcher is to collect data from real users. And it provides a helpful framework, which I'll talk about more as I talk about social identity theory, which is there's just some key concepts related to social identity that if you address in your design, theoretically, am I not working on the mic? Am I on mute? Oh yeah, okay. We're gonna have to start all over. You guys ready? Hi. All right. So, theory can help explain why your design isn't effective. And then psychology. Psychology is just the study of behavior and the mind. So there's tons of topics under the umbrella of psychology, and many of them may or may not apply to your specific product. So what I would say is there's not one correct form of psychology. There's not one correct psychological principle. There's lots of them. Feel free to use ones that you feel work for you. Feel free to pick and choose little pieces and parts from different theories and apply them to your design if you feel like that's what makes it the most effective. It might drive an academic nuts who's trying to write a paper based on a very specific framework, but it's okay in my mind if you're a designer and you're trying to pull from two different, even possibly competing theories because they help explain to you what it is you're trying to accomplish. All right, now we got all that, and we're never gonna tell the people watching the streaming what I just said, which was nice because I said a bad word, right? So, all right, the web is a social place. Does anybody disagree with that? Nope. All right. Some stats to back that up that I won't dwell on then. Facebook has lots and lots of users. They want everyone in the world to use Facebook. Twitter suggests that they have over 300 million users. The Pew Research Institute suggests that over 50% of US adults are on at least 2 forms of social media. And there are a ton of blogs. I didn't try to count them all. Why does that matter? Well, people really look to social media for critical information. They do it to socialize with each other, obviously, but they also do it for their news and news updates, products for both purchasing and then also for reviewing their purchases. People use social media, and so a lot of that comes through in influence. So if you purchase a product and people who identify with you read your review and you say it was good or bad, then they're more or less likely to want to purchase that same product. Or, for example, Yelp, where you look at what other people are saying about different restaurants that you might want to go to. And we really have put a lot of faith into this social sharing that's going on online. So, what that means, especially if you're someone like me and you work with clients and you don't have your own product, is, and probably if you have your own product as well when you're talking in meetings with other people, is everybody expects everything to be social. And they don't necessarily understand why. And here's a few quotes that may or may not be real that come from some meetings I may or may not have ever sat in. So think about a telecommunications portal where you might go on to pay your phone bill. Well, I want this to be the Facebook of telecommunications portals. That's right, I'm gonna friend you over your phone bill. Well, people should be able to tweet about their transactions, show their followers what they're doing. You know, banking really wants to grab onto this whole fintech thing and really ride the wave of technology. But I don't know what you tweet about. Like, I just overdrew my account, hashtag I'm broke. Like, I don't necessarily think that, and you know, thinking about if you were here yesterday for Scott Stratton's talk and saying not everybody should be on social media, or at least not everybody should be doing some of the things they do on it, I'll make the argument throughout my presentation that not everything should be social. And you might try it and realize that after you've tried it, but I think it's sort of the square peg round hole thing where you go into a meeting and everybody says this should be social, but why, or they don't know how. And then my last quote on here, which I think also speaks to that, is that some people think things should be social, but they just think it's because that's what the millennials are doing, or that's what my children are doing. But they don't understand why. And in social identity theory, what we'll talk about sort of tries to bring in the why, and hopefully then can help you figure out the how to make your experience social if that's something that you need to do. And that's just reiterating what I said here is the problem is there's not a one-size-fits-all solution. You can't just put a like button on everything. Facebook did that. It works really well for Facebook, and I'll talk about that. But there's specific interactions that make sense based on what your product is, and it's possible that no interaction in terms of being social makes sense. And I do know that there are appropriate social things for people to do with their online banking or banking, but I don't think tweeting is one of them. All right, so social identity theory. This is just, in its basic form, a framework that has two main pieces that explains how people develop what researchers coined their social identities. And in the 70s, these two academics, Tajfel and Turner, they published a paper that basically said, in many situations, people make decisions based on what their social groups are doing or what other people that they identify with are doing. And I think the important distinction to make here is that this doesn't mean everyone is a mindless sheep person. It's actually something that, as over time, evolutionary, is sort of ingrained in us as humans, which is we make decisions as groups. It's good for the whole if we work together. If 10 of us stay up all night watching the other 10 while they sleep, and then the other 10 stay up all day watching the other 10 while they sleep, that works for everybody. Making decisions, working together with your group is how we've survived. So I don't think it's bad to say, think of people as sort of engaging in groupthink or being persuaded and influenced by the groups that they're affiliated with. And it also depends on the context. So your social identity might be completely different when you're attending the Elements conference than when you're attending a conference in Las Vegas or than when you're meeting with your coworkers for lunch. So it depends on the context as to which group you identify with, because we all know we're members of multiple groups, and so it's going to depend on where you're at and what you're trying to accomplish as to which group you identify with the most at that time. But here's an example, a visual example of what social identity theory looks like in terms of how it plays out in real life. So a sign like this, which is suggesting, rather than thinking about the individual candidates on the ballot, whatever your political affiliation is, and I have no idea, I just found this online, and I don't think it's current, so what this sign is saying, though, is whatever political affiliation, if you were going to vote for, say, or that person, is you should also vote all Republican or all Democrat. Don't bother thinking too deeply about the candidates, just if that's the social group you align yourself with, that's what you should be doing. And here's a more recent one from the primaries, which was Jeb's tweet about being more Republican than Donald Trump. And what he was trying to do there is tap into people's social identities, which is if you identify yourself as a Republican, like me, Jeb Bush, then you know you should want to stick with me, someone who's been a Republican for longer than Donald Trump. It didn't work, right? But that's what he was trying to tap into with that tweet. I'll walk you through the individual components of social identity theory using two familiar characters, at least familiar I think, but the older I get, the less likely it might be familiar. Everybody familiar with these two crazy guys? Yeah. All right. So we have Mac and PC, and we'll walk you through the two components, which are self-categorization and then social comparison. And that's what social identity theory is as far as what I think you need to know for the sake of this presentation. It does get a lot more academic than that, and there is 30 years of additional research around that. Okay. So self-categorization is when you go and you start categorizing yourself based on things that you like, things that you do. So for example, I dress in skinny jeans and have a sleeve of tattoos. I wear suits and part my hair and comb it to the side. And then you start looking at other people and you say, well, you wear skinny jeans and you cuss a lot and you smoke. And so you're just always, and think about yourself as you go through life, you start to notice things either about yourself or about others. And what that's called, according to the researchers, is just self-categorization. You're always categorizing things, yes or no, skinny jeans or bell bottoms. And so that's the first step in developing your social identity. You're categorizing things. You're understanding what makes up something and whether or not that quality exists in yourself and in others. Then the next piece to social identity is once you've started categorizing things, is the social comparison piece. And that's when you start to say, oh, hey, we both wear skinny jeans and have sleeves of tattoos. We're in what's called an in-group relationship. We're in the same group. Oh, you wear bell bottoms or you wear a suit and use a PC. You're out group. And the reason that's important, according to the researchers, is that your in-group is going to really influence your behaviors, and you're going to want to start to do things that make you feel more alike your in-group. What you're trying to do is strengthen your ties. So if there's a leader, or if you're in the leadership position, the decisions you make, the other people who consider themselves in group with you are going to try to make decisions that align with what you're doing. So obviously something happened and Mac is now trying to be more like PC by wearing a suit. So maybe in this situation that's right here, they're finding themselves in the same group for something else. Maybe they're both members of the I Like Broccoli Club. And so they've decided that because they have broccoli in common, they're in the same in-group and they're at the all-you-can-eat broccoli buffet. And so that's the social identity that really is coming through in this scenario. And all of a sudden, Mac's like, well, hey, I'm going to start dressing in a suit too. But the important piece is to know that, so that's going to influence your decision making in terms of, do you want to make decisions that make you more alike other people? Or on the opposite end of the spectrum, do you make decisions that make you more different from others? And that's something that happens too. And some extreme situations would be, well, the easy one is like sports. I said I graduated from OSU. I'm sure there's at least one Penn State fan in here. You would never wear an Ohio State football jersey, okay? You would do exactly the opposite of what you think an Ohio State fan would do. And it's to show that you're different from them, especially if you have Penn State friends who are around you. You're definitely going to want to show them, I am not like these people over here. And so that's what comes out to play in decision making. Are you making decisions that make you feel more like your in-group, or are you making decisions that make you feel less like people you consider out-group? And that's what we need to think about when we're creating social experiences for our digital properties, which is, how are our users able to first categorize themselves? So what are the different ways that somebody using your product can categorize themselves? First one's the easiest, which is, are they a user or not? Going from there, are there other different options? I can't speak to the different products that many of you might represent, or if you're working with clients, the many products they might represent. But then how can their decisions, and how can you show them that their decisions make them more like other people in their group, or less like people they would consider out-group? And so I'll walk you through it from the perspective of Facebook, which even Facebook recently realized just like letting people like things isn't enough. And so they came out with their reactions. Who's this good-looking guy? You're supposed to laugh, come on. Anyway, so just by joining Facebook, you've categorized yourself. You're a Facebook user. So for me, the whole profile picture, that's my wife. I've categorized myself as a married person, and I make that very clear. I've also got pictures of this little girl right here, so I categorize myself as a parent. And everything about the Facebook platform is meant to let you categorize yourself. Who am I? Where did I go to school? Where do I live? What sports do I like? Where have I checked in? What music do I listen to? What TV shows do I like? All of that, I'm categorizing myself by liking things or joining things. Liking other people's conversations. Of course, it's not on here, but along the side, we have our news feed where we see what other people are doing. So that's categorizing yourself. My whole Facebook page, your whole Facebook page is categorical information. The things that you like, the things that make you who you are. The next step is people come along and look at your profile, and they are able to engage in social comparison. So if you look at me and you say, well, I went to the Ohio State University, and I like 3 of the music bands that you have listed on your page, that might make you more curious to learn about me, because you see we have these things in common. I might be a part of your in-group. Or on the opposite, you might say, okay, he likes a bunch of things that I don't like, and I'm probably not going to share a lot of, maybe you see a lot of very antagonistic political posts, and you instantly know from that, well, I'm out-group. Like, I don't really want to be on somebody's page who has a bunch of antagonistic political things that they're saying to other people. And so Facebook, what's interesting about it is that you can be diametrically opposed to somebody and still live just fine on the platform. You can have your Facebook page, and somebody with 100% of the opposite characteristics can have their Facebook page and their group that they're a part of, and you can both coexist on Facebook without really interacting. And so that might be something that's relatively unique to them because they just have this platform for people to build profiles on. But thinking about how might you be able to, if you have multiple types of users, allow them all to function to where they're able to affiliate themselves with the other groups that they might feel like they're a part of, while they're not necessarily butting heads with people that they feel like are out-group. Another example, though, from Facebook is where they have groups that are actually opposed to other groups. I am not a member, but the Hunters Against PETA page, when people who are on Facebook and are interested in either hunting or being against PETA, they might see this page and they instantly know who is the in group, okay, it's hunters, who is the out group, PETA. And if you join the page, the whole point is to reinforce that in-group value set. So you see pictures of meat, which is yummy and delicious, and proof that it's good for you. You see that other people you know, this is not a true number, I don't think there's 9 million of them, but other people you know, like right here it tells me I have 22 other friends who are part of this group. That is meant to trigger my interest. Oh, wait, I'm not a member of Hunters Against PETA yet, because I see 22 of my friends are, though. I'm definitely going to want to explore more about this. And that's where I'll start to categorize myself and say, you know, yes, I hunt. No, I don't like PETA. Why? These people seem to be right down my alley. And then once you join, or if you're on the page, you understand that the things you post are going to be reinforced by the other people who are reading them. And that's when you get people who say some things that are very, I don't know, this person is saying things that I don't think you'd necessarily say to somebody's face, which is like, oh, these people from PETA were on campus at, I think, Oregon State University, and then at the end she calls them freaking psychos. You don't call people that you want to be like freaking psychos. But what's taking place here is in line with what social identity would suggest, which is the in-group, the hunters that are against PETA, are very much saying things that set them apart from the out-group. So you don't call people you want to be a part of a bunch of freaking psychos. But her comment is going to get liked by other people who do identify with her, and that's going to reinforce, theoretically that should reinforce her ties with the group. And from an evolutionary standpoint, that means this group is strengthening its ties with each other, and if they needed to move forward in some type of life or death situation, that they would stick together. All right, so my premise though is that Facebook does what they do really well, that's why they're Facebook, but we can't all be and shouldn't all try to be Facebook. So we can think about doing things beyond just putting a like button or reactions to what people say or sharing an article. And so I want to show you some examples that I think are pretty effective from not just Facebook. And I'll say up front that this is my take on it. I'm not suggesting that either Facebook or any of the next examples actually sat down and thought about social identity theory in creating their product. What I'm saying is taking social identity theory and being Victor, I can sit down and look at what's going on and say, well, I can make an argument that that's what's taking place here. So take that for what it's worth. I'm pretty sure Mark Zuckerberg, although he was at Harvard at the time, maybe he was being exposed to that kind of thinking, didn't sit down and say, how can I address self-categorization and social comparison? But that is what people are doing on Facebook. So who's familiar with Mendeley? Come on, we got some people in here, I'm sure. Yeah, right? They took one of the most exciting topics in the world, academic journals, and made it social. Hey, what's the laughing for? So Mendeley allows you to both categorize yourself and engage in social comparison around academic topics and academic journals. So for example, I categorize myself as a qualitative researcher. Most of the research I engage in is interviews and is collecting qualitative data. So I affiliate myself with that group. And once I join that group, I know that what other people are reading in the qualitative research group are papers that I might be more interested in. And if you're familiar with academia from the standpoint of trying to get tenure or try to become a recognized name in your field, it's all about citations. It's all about your in-group propping you up and saying, oh man, your work is so smart, I'm going to use it as the basis for my work or the thinking behind my study. So something like Mendeley, where you're promoting the community around academia, is really important for this specific topic. And so let's say I categorize myself as a qualitative researcher and I start to look through these different articles, well, I start to see who's sharing them too then. And Mendeley allows me to then potentially reach out and learn more about individuals. So I can say like, okay, you guys are in the qualitative research methodology group. Maybe I'll send you a message and say, hey, there's this event that's going on, and we can all cite journal articles together if you want to come out to it. On the opposite side, similar to Facebook, there might be the quantitative research group, and that might be a group that I don't want to have anything to do with. And so I can look at that and say, no thank you, and pass on that group, but I can still exist on the Mendeley platform. But I might see maybe there's some competition too. Like maybe I'll see that some of the quantitative articles are being cited more, or being shared more. Maybe it'll make me want to post some more qualitative work or bump up some of my friends' articles by sharing them. And so thinking about how you can actually create a little bit of positive tension around competition between groups is another thing to keep in mind when you're thinking about designing for social experiences and social identity theory. And I have a good example of that coming up, which is Kiva. Is anybody here familiar with that? All right, so Kiva is like an online micro-lending platform, basically small loans for small entrepreneurs. And I really admire, from my perspective, how they tap into social identity theory, which is, if you believe in them and you believe in their mission, then you think that they're trying to do good things, which is fund entrepreneurial people that are in situations where they can't necessarily easily get funds through these microloans. Well, Kiva allows the people who are making the loans to form groups, so there's self-categorization and social comparison going on, and what it should be doing is creating tension between groups, but around a positive experience, which is providing more funds for these small businesses. And so if you look at it, the number one and number two group are the atheists and the Christians, two groups that really probably don't like each other by definition. So if you're a Kiva Christian and you log in and you see, holy moly, the atheists are given more money this month, it might be more likely to make you whip out your checkbook and say, how much can I give to have us jump over them? And so by displaying this, by allowing people to categorize and then join groups, Kiva is sort of being devious in a way that they're tapping into these social identities that people have and might feel really strongly about. I mean, I don't think it's by chance that it's atheists and Christians that are at the top. Those are topics, that's an area that people tend to inherently feel strongly about. But what they're trying to do, rather than raise money for big business or some evil thing, you'd hope, is they're hopefully pumping up their funds around supporting these small entrepreneurs in situations where they can't get traditional loans. And then if you look along the side when somebody logs in, it tells you like what are the groups that have new members coming in and what are the groups that are trending highest for the month. And what that is supposed to really do is tap into your social identity. So you come in and you say, well, I feel like I'm more of a Pepsi company employee today. And so I'm going to join that group, and when I give money, it's going to go under that name, and it's going to reflect to the whole public who comes onto Kiva that PepsiCo employees, my in-group, are really good at giving money. And, you know, if I think the Christians and atheists is probably the PepsiCo and Coca-Cola. So they're probably thinking like, and hopefully Coke employees will log in and see they're doing really terrible. And from Kiva's standpoint, that would hopefully mean that the Coke employees are going to start to donate more money. Now, there's an area where this could also backfire, which is, let's say you were a member of Hewlett-Packard, which is down here, I think at less than 9. And that's for new people that have joined. But let's say you're Hewlett-Packard, or you're something it's a real laggard, and you're like, oh, this is hopeless. I will never catch up to the group in front of me. That might make you less likely to join, or if you're going to give money, less likely to give money in the name of that organization, because there's some aversion to attaching yourself to either a losing cause or a group that doesn't seem like they're doing as well as others. And I think that's where, in this context, people might be more likely to switch identities, like, oh, you know, I'm a HP employee, but I'm also a Christian, I'm going to affiliate myself more with the Christian group when I join and give money if you can only choose one. And then going from there, if you extrapolate that to something like, okay, let's say it's an article and nobody shared it, who comes along and is the first person to share an article if it's been sitting there for a month and no one shared it? So what the point is that I think that in some experiences, if there's not any activity, that can actually be, it can take away from the likelihood that people are going to engage socially around something. And I'll talk about that for another product in a few slides. But I have one more to show you. And this was a guess on my part, but this next slide is my completely pandering to the audience. Are we Steelers fans here? All right, so yeah, this is the slide that sometimes it's the Redskins, sometimes it's Ohio State Buckeyes, whatever. Sports is where it's at when it comes to social identity. Who doesn't like to paint their face and scream for their favorite team? But if you think about it, it is the epitome of in-group and out-group. People are a fan of their team. They're not a fan of all the teams usually, and they're certainly not a fan of their rival team. Those in-group and out-group comes into play big time in sports. And so if you take a look at the Steelers page, they do a great job of acknowledging this, and they know that what they're doing is facilitating social in-group interaction around their product, which is their team. So you can't see it here, but cut off right here is like the icons of all their different social media experiences. So immediately you know, okay, the Steelers want me to interact with people around social media and around the Steelers football. Over here, I mean, there's everything from like, do you want the Steelers app on your phone? Do you want your baby to be a Steeler in training? Do you need a desktop? Like, what can't you do, right, to show other people, I'm with the Steelers, okay? I'm going to have to answer my phone with my Steelers ringtone and my Steelers app. And if you're in a hostile territory, people will know, okay, I'm not part of their group. But if you're in a hostile territory and you hear the Steelers ringtone on someone else's phone, you're going to be like, I know you. And like, let's join up. Let's talk about this. And I don't know if it's on here, but maybe it's on upcoming events. But a lot of these pages will have things like, let's go to the away games together, and you can buy a travel package. And what that's trying to do is keep you in your safe in-group setting while you go into enemy territory, the complete out-group, the away field. But you're going to go there and cheer on your team. So it's really the low-hanging fruit when it comes to social identity and how that experience plays out. But sports and those types of topics that people are really passionate about is where social identity theory really bubbles up to the top in an obvious way. Now, my next example is also my last. It's going to be something that I don't think worked very well, and I can say that because I don't think it exists anymore. But first, I have to ask, because I'm always afraid, has anybody in the room ever worked for or currently work with a product called Social Grocery? All right. I wish. You don't. Do you really? No way, really?
Well, I think it used to be an app that the company I used to work for developed.
I hope you're just pulling my leg to make me feel uncomfortable. All right, anyway. All right. So. Definitely. Oh, we got to talk afterwards. I hope you don't beat me up. This can't be true. I've said this before, and this is wonderful. All right, so Social Grocery, you can Google it. I don't think it exists anymore, and I'm going to tell you why, at least through the lens of social identity theory, I don't think it exists anymore. First of all, I don't think people want to be necessarily social around their groceries, and that's what I'm saying you need to think about. Does a social experience make sense for what you're doing? I know if people are out grocery shopping and they see something crazy, they're going to pull out their phone and tweet it. But they're not going to pull out their phone, log into Social Grocery, and be like, holy moly, right? There's already an app for that. It's called Twitter. And then what the property is, though, there's a website, which I have a little pop out up here, but then there's a Facebook page and a Twitter page, and it's all around this concept of let's make the concept of grocery shopping and groceries social. The problem is, whether or not people think grocery shopping should be social, it's not the kind of behavior that comes naturally to people. Like, you don't identify yourself in most situations as a person who eats an orange. Maybe there's situations where that happens. Or you might, taking it a little bit higher level, you might identify yourself as like a Giant shopper or a Kroger shopper or a Safeway shopper. But by individual product, most people don't identify themselves at a social level. Like, I don't ever go out and look for all the other Mrs. Butterworth's fan. Like, I like Mrs. Butterworth, but that's not the people that I want to hang out with. And so if you're going to do something like social grocery, you have to teach people that that's what they should be doing. I want you to be social around this experience. And so let's just say that it was sometime in 2015 when I took this screenshot. The problem is, this is their social experience. This is their Facebook page. It hadn't been updated since sometime in, I think, 2013 or 2012. I'm sorry, this screen is horrible because I don't think it exists anymore and I couldn't get a newer version. Then I went to their Twitter page, same thing. It had been over 6 months, possibly over 18 months, but it didn't have the year stamp next to the date since the last time they had tweeted. So they're not teaching people to be social around their product. And then the piece where people could actually build their social identity was on their website, where they tried to sort of do some gamification by giving people a title. So I'm guessing that's based on the number of times you post. This person was a store wanderer, and her comment, appropriate, is that Mrs. Dash rocks, right? No one's going to argue that. But where do you go from there? Yes. I mean, I think, so how do you teach people what you want to say is Mrs. Dash rocks, and here's a recipe? Or Mrs. Dash rocks, and let's explore what new flavors of Mrs. Dash should exist. But social grocery wasn't doing this. And now I'm going to make you come up front and tell us why. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But I'm really excited you're here today. So the biggest takeaway that I would like you to have from this, though, is if you or your boss or your client has said, create this social experience around product X, you're going to have to be willing to stick around and do that. If social grocery was committed to having a social grocery shopping experience, I should check their Facebook page, and I shouldn't see what's your favorite vegetable, and it's a 3-year-old question. I should see something that's going to actually pull me into a conversation, cucumbers, by the way, but where do you go from there? And then I should see it happening almost every day, even if that means you have to pay somebody to actually get onto your feed and make some, I call it seeding, call it whatever you want. It's not being deceptive, but if you have to pay an employee to post tweets, to do things on Facebook, again, like what Scott was saying yesterday, not everybody should be on Twitter, not everybody should be on Facebook, but if you hire the person who should be on there and can make your product social, you have to commit to that, and there's no finite period of time that it's going to take. Social grocery might have needed to be a 3-year experiment before people were like, yeah, I can social grocery, and maybe they quit it 2 years and 6 months because it was frustrating and because they didn't budget that period of time to actually seed the conversation. But if your boss wants you to make overdrawing on your checking account a social experience, people are going to be like, whoa, I'm not used to doing that. You have to be committed to staying involved in that conversation so that you start to make it an acceptable experience to people. And they start to think, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is what's happening. There's a conversation. There's an in-group of people who like tomatoes and avocados and cucumbers, and they're having a conversation on the social grocery website. And so that's one of the biggest things I'd like you to take away is if you're considering a social experience is that you're willing to actually stay invested in it, especially if there's not currently or inherently conversation going on around it. So now for my last few slides. This is Kieran. He's a colleague of mine. If you're interested in meeting him in real life, feel free to come up afterwards and I can share his contact information. I'm just kidding. But he's in all my pictures, so I wanted to introduce him. First of all, I'm a researcher, so I always say research should be part of the process. If you're thinking about or currently have a social experience as part of your product, I'm going to recommend that you do some UX assessment or heuristic analysis around what your property is, how it's effectively engaging people in social identity, and you can use the 2 key components that I introduced, which is self-categorization and social comparison. You can say, how are people categorizing themselves on our site or with our product? What are the in-groups that exist, and are those out-groups? Can we play up some friendly competition a similar way that Kiva does? Interviewing people, understanding, maybe with social grocery, they should have gone out and understood what is the normal process. Are people just tweeting about their grocery experience? Because if they're doing that, how does social grocery maybe partner with Twitter to become a more social experience versus trying to pull traffic from Twitter and posting about your grocery shopping experience through their platform. And then usability testing to make sure your product is actually working for people. Asking some questions, and this is regardless of whether or not you're doing research with your users, but questions you should ask and understand while you're designing and developing your product, which is, how can you make sure that people are able to categorize themselves and understand what use of your product, what group that makes them a part of, or what that separates them from? Is it a PC and a Mac thing? Can there not be? Can two different groups not use your product? Does use of your product does use of Penn State make you not Ohio State? Something like that. And then can you show users what they have in common? Are you able to surface different things that might say, you know, maybe that's where a social banking experience could go, which is like other homeowners like you, or other people who are in a similar age range. And so you don't necessarily focus on your account balance when you're talking about a banking social experience. You're talking about some other different life events or places in your life that people might have that are common to their group. I always recommend doing a competitive analysis, looking across the landscape and seeing what your competitors are doing, because you can look at what's working right and what's working well, and then you can also look at what's not doing very well, and you can avoid that. Where are there opportunities to engage in discussion? Are there natural places to insert a conversation around use of your product? Are forums, chat groups, the fan page for the Steelers, it takes you to all their social media. I bet you that's buzzing on a Sunday morning. So what are you doing when there's times that possibly use of your product could be creating a buzz? And then the social grocery thing again, which is, are you committed to making sure that you're gonna stick around during the first fledgling and probably very frustrating? I mean, I stopped blogging like every one of the 15 blogs I've started, and I look at the traffic and I'm like, what am I doing wrong? I'm supposed to go viral the first post, second at the most. That doesn't happen. I think it happened to a few people and we all heard about it and I was like, yes, I'm gonna be like them, but I came so late in the game and nothing I write about is ever gonna go viral. But if I write and I write and I write 15, 20, 30 posts, am I willing to be committed to that and low traffic until it starts to stick and people start to come and people start to understand there's a conversation going on here and I can join in? Are you willing to go through that and be patient? And then there's some design opportunities around showing your users how your product aligns them with other users. What are their characteristics? This is really very individual in terms of what is your product and how you insert this into your design. Making sure people know when to engage in a social interaction and how you see the interaction. And then iteration, learning from your experience, making sure that you're able to take lessons learned and update your product. And in the end, if you decide a social experience isn't appropriate for what I'm doing, I won't be mad at you. So with that, let's do some questions. I think we have time for a half a question. Yes?
Hang on, I have to throw this to you. Okay.
Good throw.
So, social identity is a very intriguing concept, right? What's real and what's fake, right? So I could be a 17-year-old female on Facebook. I could, right? So how does that relate to...
You're not?
How does that relate to your research? Because you look at what you see, but not what's behind it, or what people try to hide or pretend, you know, all these kind of categories.
So I think what I would say to that is, whether somebody is truly who they are telling you they are, if you're designing an experience that's supposed to tap into who they feel they are, that's not really for you to say is right or wrong. So if you felt like you were a 17-year-old female on Facebook, and I'm designing an experience for a 17-year-old female on Facebook, and you're using it, I don't care. You're using my product. Mm-hmm. I'm not trying to tap into convincing you you're anybody who you're not. It's actually the opposite. I'm trying to honor who you are by saying, look, here's a space that you can engage in activities that are gonna preferably make you feel more like the group that you want to be a part of. Now, that's a very, I guess, it could be a touchy subject in terms of a man trying to pretend to be a 17-year-old girl, but taking it to a more benign place, let's say you're a tomato lover, but you're pretending to love watermelon, you know, come on and have the conversation. I don't see the harm in that. And if it makes you want to use my product because I let you love watermelons even though you don't, you know what? Buy one, try one. I don't know. I'm okay with that. Go ahead.
I have a comment more than a question. My whole life is spent with people who want to be, me to help them be social. We've got to do social. And a lot of them are business people, primarily HR people. And, you know, they have a hard time understanding that nobody on the planet wants to talk about your sexual harassment policy but you. There is no online forum. So thank you for Social Grocery, because I think that's finally the example I need to say,
Right.
Nobody wants to talk about your oranges for very long. There's not anything. Find interesting conversations. Find other things to say. Right?
Exactly.
So that was great. It was
Thank
perfect.
you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And the only thing I would say to follow up, it would be that, and I think it should be fine. They don't need a conversation around their policy, but they need people to be aware of it. So if you make it available and obvious, and maybe there's not a conversation we have, but there's a share, and you can share it or point somebody in that direction, that's fine. Understanding why they think a conversation should take place around it is trying to tap into that whole, so why do you think this has to be social to be effective?
Right. Well, part of the problem is doing social is not a strategy. I mean, that's their whole goal is we need to have a Twitter account.
Right.
We need to have a Facebook. Right.
Exactly.
So anyway. But
Yes, no, great point.
If you need another example.
Not really.
You must talk into this box. Or
He's
don't
actually
speak.
got to wear a mask and distort his voice when he talks about
If you need another example, they had one called My Baby, which was the same company, which was targeted to parents, which fell faster than SoGro did. So.
Oh, and it's called Sogo? I'm using that. All right, well, thank you. And thank you for not beating me up, because I've told many audiences that someday I will meet you and you will beat me up. Go ahead.
With the social grocery thing, I think people do talk about food on, say, Instagram and Pinterest, but it's just with hashtags. There's no way to like monetize that or host the conversation.
That's true, and also those are the platforms that it's happening on. I think with social grocery, and again, I'm not the expert apparently on social grocery in this room, I think the problem is trying to insert a completely different platform, which is taking it to another conversation space. Trust me, people are talking about their food, but it's happening on Facebook, it's happening on Twitter, it's happening on Instagram. And if you're doing it and it's organically happening somewhere, why would you want to, oh wait, I'm not gonna post this to Twitter because it's food related, I'm gonna go to Sogo and use their app. So, and I don't know, but yeah, that's a great point, which is, yes, food and what we do on a daily basis is naturally being discussed, but it's happening in places where the conversation popped up. And I'm not saying it could never, like that social grocery would have never been successful, but possibly they needed to invest 3, 4, 5 years in having that conversation. Is it worth it if that's what you want to do to shift the conversation away from where it's happening? And we probably have to wrap up.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's all the time we have. But round of applause for Victor, and thanks everybody for
Thank you all
coming.
for coming out today. I appreciate it. And if you don't have time to get a bookmark, you can feel free to snapshot this. Allegedly, my book will be out before the end of possibly this week, definitely by the end of the month. But I would love to hand you a bookmark and meet you in person if we have time for that too. Thank you.
So, ironically enough, I'm actually a School of Natural Resources grad, too.
Are you? High five.